Welcome to the Surf Strong Show, conversations for a healthy community. I'm your host, Greg Finch. I'd like to remind you to like, comment, subscribe to this and all of our episodes of the Surf Strong Show wherever you get your podcasts. For all show notes and links that we talk about in the episodes, videos of the podcast, you can go to surfstrongfit.com/podcast for this and all the past episodes. Thanks for joining us. It really means a lot.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much. This is our second episode of the Surf Strong Express Show. We are live, which should be fun. It won't be perfect, but it should be at least entertaining. So today we have Steve Gwenin, and he is part of Work Less, Surf More. And we met recently on it, and we're really stoked to have him on the show. And I'm going to kind of let him talk a little bit about himself. Usually I'll do the bios, but since we're live, you don't have to hear me talk all the time. We'll let Steve kind of talk a little bit about what he's got going on and go from there. Thanks, Steve, for being part of the show. I really appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure, Greg. It's a pleasure. So thanks very much. Yeah, so I'm a community leader at Work Less, Surf More, which is a Facebook online private exclusive community, really of surfers, of senior managers who surf and want to work less and surf more. So a lot of the discussions are around mindset, around work-life balance, around practicalities, but mostly it comes down to mindset. So, you know, as surfers, we go to the beach, we spend the week or the day checking the forecast, deciding like when it's going to be best, when's the tide, when's the wind, when's the swell coming in, what do my meetings look like, what are my work commitments, what do I got on commitments with a family, with friends, who have I said yes to helping. And we constantly got this mind battle going on about how we're going to get to the surf and are we going to get in and how often are we going to get in. And really a lot of the discussions are around that process that we all go through, from sitting at home looking at the forecast to being on the deck, what I call the deck of debate, looking at the waves. And on one shoulder there's this, I really want to get in and I'm desperate to get in and get a wave. And on the other shoulder, it's like, it's not very good. It's a bit onshore. It's a bit big, a bit small, a bit cold. And I've got this to do and that to do. And I really should press on. And it's around that eternal dance that we all have in our minds, really. So sort of practical tips, but how to address those and sort of what are the biggest challenges people are facing and what could they do to overcome them, and helping people to think through those processes, really.
Yeah. And I talk with clients a lot about this too. That mindset, like you described, is so critical. And I even take it and include that physical state too. In kind of a very parallel way, I'll start with clients. When I used to train more general fitness clients, this happened a lot more. As surfers, we really have such a connection to that movement and we know how it feeds us. But so often clients would say, oh, well, I'm just lazy. And I would always say, you know, it's not that simple. You really, this primal part of your brain it's got two jobs. It's trying to conserve calories and it's trying to keep you safe, reduce risk. And so like something like surfing, it's so specifically the opposite of those two things. You're going to use a lot of calories. And while it's a very minimal risk overall in the things that we might face in our life, like compared to driving your car down the street, your primal part of your brain still has that perception as that's risk. So there's this other part that's really always working against us, if you will. It doesn't understand how it feeds our soul and feeds just the better version of ourselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the discussions, it's funny, like we did, like there you're essentially referencing fear, but fear comes in all sort of shapes and sizes around all different things. So for a lot of people, there's that fear of, if I take 1 hour and go for a surf, my company's going to collapse. I'm going to lose my job. If I come in late and make up the time later on, even that, that's the, I can't possibly do that. I'll lose my job. I can't even ask about flexi time. I can't do this. I can't do that. and that's something that really, if you take that fear, and as you say, God, it's maybe not a realistic fear, it's maybe quite an unlikely fear, but whether it's about surfing and the big waves, or the sharks, or about taking an hour out once a week to go for a surf, there's part of that is a fear barrier. So it's sort of working through that, like, and looking at what would actually happen and what's realistic, and sort of helping people to address fear is a part of what we talk about in the group. And then also, as you know, I'm a surf life coach as well, so I do help people very specifically with fear who have got good reasons for fears, and then others where those fears are more unfounded, but that they're still very true, very real fears for them, and sort of helping them work through that. And there's lots of challenges to people finding ways to get into the surf, and some of it's fear, a lot of it's sort of connected with work-life balance, with commitments, and again, those commitments really come back to sort of primal instincts. As humans, I don't know how many million years ago, 1 million years ago, let's say, we depended on community to survive. So you want to help people, you want to be liked, accepted, and have that security of the tribe, of the clan. You don't want to be thrown out the cave to the bears. So there's a lot of that. I think that sort of primal instinct, and then consciously working to assess in today's world, is that realistically a fear, and is it, how likely is it actually, given this particular intended action, and step by step, can we overcome it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also too, time, like you mentioned, we have such a, of course, we're at the center of our own worlds. And so the time that we have and the perception of that seems so long, the time is so elastic. And yeah, on that evolutionary level, it is literally just a blip. And so what we think of as being in full control of our choices, and how we really don't appreciate or even fully understand how that evolutionary process is influencing your day-to-day choices. We still are ultimately responsible for our own choices, but you have to acknowledge and appreciate that this influence is part of what's going on, and how to acknowledge that and work through that. And probably what I'm sure you experience with your clients is setting up systems in which to acknowledge that and then improve on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really equipping people with the knowledge about where it might be coming from, like possible sources of what's holding them back, opening their eyes to the concept, really, that it is actually a choice. So when people join the community that I've got, I ask everyone, like, what's stopping you surfing? Like, what's your biggest challenge? What's actually stopping you getting in the water? And people always will, there's a list of options, but mostly I hear, conditions, or it's work, or it's family, or it's money, or like, there's a whole bunch of things. Very, very rarely does anyone just say my mind. Like, the odd person gets it, but mostly at the beginning, it's all these external things, and it's not them. And then through time, I like to think, and what we've seen from the community is there's a bigger understanding that actually it's my mind, and I could make some different choices. I could choose to go, and that would mean some other things would change, some compromises. There would be change, which is a bit scary in itself, but it's my choices that are affecting my actions.
And also, that's very empowering. It might be frightening to know that ultimately this is the choices that I'm making and how to balance those things. But also, when you do acknowledge that, it is empowering. Okay, like, how do I frame my week and the responsibilities that I have to myself and others to make sure that I'm always carving out this piece? And everybody we talk to, and both of us know, of course, like, it's all these circles moving for surfing. You can't just, this is why I took up mountain biking. I had clients, friends.
So I've had this discussion with so many people before. Like,
oh my gosh, it really, like, this is almost like a side podcast here talking about mountain biking. I won't go too deep into it, but I had friends and clients that just constantly get a bike, get a bike, get a bike. And I have this great client, Andrew, and he's a Kiwi. He's a mate. He's like, it's always 3 to 6 feet offshore on the mountain when you're riding. You can always go do it. And that's what I've really found is surfing will always be my first joy and my first passion. But when it's truly not able to do it, then I have this other outlet in which to kind of nourish your body and clear your mind. But what's interesting about that, Steve, is it's not, I thought, oh, I might have to split my time between these two things, starting to do it. And what I found actually for myself is the opposite, because I do love surfing so much that when I'm standing on the shore, I say to myself, I have to move today.
Okay.
That's my kind of rule. Yeah, I have to move every day.
Yeah.
So either I'm going to paddle out right now, which is always my first choice, or I'm going to get all my stuff together and go for a ride, which will also be great, but not as great as surfing. So for me, I found it pushes me to take that, okay, I'm going to do this now more, which is so interesting to me. Again, back to mine.
I got to share something similar, but it's a little bit more stick and less carrot. So I have very similar conversation with myself, as I'm standing on the deck. But if I don't go surfing, I've got to come home and run, which I don't particularly enjoy. So it's like
there you go.
I'll go surfing.
Yeah.
I do run. I used to run quite a lot, but now I've sort of pulled at my knees and getting older. I'm 50. I'm like, once a week I jog, but it's actually a jog, not a run. But I still do it. And there's normally one day a week where conditions aren't great. So generally that happens. But it's definitely more of a bad alternative for me.
Well, here's another thing that I've talked about a lot recently. I started doing rucking, which for anybody that is not familiar with it, essentially you're wearing a weighted backpack, and it's nothing revolutionary, brand new. Armed services have been using that style of training for as long as there's been armies. But one thing about that, because I've never really enjoyed jogging or running. I'll do it on the beach sometimes, but it's definitely not something that feeds me in that way. It's an exercise and an output. But one thing about the rucking that I really love, and I really advocate it to clients now too, is that there's zero barrier. You literally have this backpack. I just have a dedicated backpack with weight in it. It's sitting right inside my garage door. And when I work from home just like you do. And so when I'm in the throw of it, I'm like, you got to go move. Surfing, it's blown out's not really an option today. So whereas before, mountain biking is, okay, I got to get my stuff together. It's not a big barrier. But again, you're working, like you said, mine. That rucking is like you literally put your backpack on and you walk out the door. And having that super low barrier for me has been huge. It's been really huge. The other part about it is your mind is free. Surfing, obviously, you get some reprieve sometimes, sitting on your board waiting for the next set. You have kind of space. But a lot of the time, if you're getting a lot of waves, is you're occupied. You have to be right there, of course, which is why we love it. Mountain biking, technical, I'm not falling and breaking something here, so I'm going to be right here. But when you just have a backpack on and you're going hiking, even around the streets around my house, or if I go into the hills, like your mind is really able to go places. And I find without really a focused effort to work on something, I find I am working through some things that might be kind of bubbling under the surface there. And it's also gives you the space to then work on your breath, to be really present and cognizant with your breath and your recovery. So those are kind of my 3 things I do. And I kind of push out to clients, like, sample these things. You got the surfing thing, keep it on the top list of what for your passion, but then have these other things to kind of fill in. When you are, this is kind of a nice little segue here to kind of talk about like what you're doing and bringing your expertise to that. talk a little bit about your background and what drove some of those choice changes into what you're doing now and bringing that to your clients and coaching them in that way too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my background, it depends when you want to start it, but I actually think it's relevant. So and I was thinking about this morning, as a very young man, as a boy, I grew up in the woods, in a cottage by some woods, and spent a lot of time outdoors with nature. I then moved into a town for sort of big school, as it were, a secondary school, high school, and then, like, on my holidays, we'd go to sort of North Wales. So it's, coastal area, beautiful dunes, big beaches, stunning scenery, and I did a little bit of surfing and stuff like that. And then from there, that sort of my passion for nature and the great outdoors, as it were, really sort of fed into conservation. Went and did a marine biological degree. Did a bit of surf lifeguarding, did conservation work as a marine biologist, and was lucky enough to sort of be able to develop a career in that, set up a company around that area, and sort of kept searching the world, setting up projects. I worked in Mexico for a bit, in Costa Rica for a bit. I was lucky, time in Africa and in Asia, working on conservation projects. And super passionate about it all. But luckily, or for whatever reason, those projects went really well, and it turned into an organization that grew. And then in my own particular role in it, went from sort of setting up the project in the jungle and diving on coral reefs and doing research, to sort of overseeing global teams, to then being CEO and sitting in a boardroom, looking at graphs, looking at numbers, looking at policies. So I loved what we were doing from a conservation perspective, which I was and still am super passionate about. But my own particular role in that mission, I no longer loved. I didn't love what I was doing on a day-to-day basis, which coincided, or was maybe partly a result of young kids, like, getting to the stage where they were getting into the sea. I was taking them in when I could, but then I was also getting phone calls from my mates, sending me messages going, "Oh, yeah, your son was surfing really well today. You should have been there." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'll get there as soon as I finish this policy."
Right.
That really sort of, I felt that despite really loving the end result of what we were doing, I was no longer sort of loving my day-to-day role, and I think that affected both my performance in that day-to-day role, and it definitely impacted upon my family life, my family time, and how much time and energy I was putting into it. And that was frustrating me. I was getting annoyed, frustrated, angry, resentful. you could choose your negative emotion. I knew I wasn't happy about it, but I had this huge commitment to the organization that I'd been involved with from the very early days. I was essential, irreplaceable, as it were. And all of those emotions, everyone's depending on me, on the family side and on the business side. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle. They've made commitments, they've got people depending on them, they feel responsible for all of that, and they can't possibly walk away from any of it. So myself, I probably spent a good year, maybe more, sort of procrastinating around, like, do I make a change? Do I not? And in the meantime, everything's busy, and things are happening, and time slips by. And then eventually I got to the stage where I decided it was definitely time for a change. The kids are only going to be young for so long. That's where I want part of my time to be spent, or enough of my time to be spent, enough for me. So yeah, I stepped away, spent probably 6 months sort of brainstorming what was coming next. It wasn't like I had a side hustle on the go and it was a straight step across. I was at the stage where it was, so busy and so dedicated to that organization that I couldn't get anything else up and running. So I had to sort of almost jump, and then spend some time thinking about it. And during that time, I did a lot of surfing, spoke to a lot of people, a lot of mentors, lot of local surfers. Talked about sort of what I'd done. Had a few guys go, you're an inspiration to us. Oh, this is great. We should all be doing this. And really, the next business came out of those comments. It was all around working with people, coaching them. I've done a lot of coaching and mentoring and training before. So then I started doing that just informally, locally, helping a few mates out. And then put it online, tested it out, and so then developed a business out the back of it. So I've sort of founded, actually almost a year ago, Surfers Life Club, which is the business which helps senior managers sort of work less and surf more. But it's a combination of sort of business coaching and life coaching, really depending on what the issues are of the individual and everyone's situation, everyone's circumstances and experience are different. So it's really down to that individual quite how I coach them. But I use a lot of business tools and a lot of sort of life coaching tools. But essentially, it's coaching to overcome whatever challenges people face.
Yeah.
And then really as an offshoot of that, and the first testing area for it was just the online community, where I just basically invited people in. Yeah, this is what we talk about, and did write posts about it. Which it's funny because I used to do, when I worked at sea ages and ages ago. I wrote a couple of short stories, and I started writing a novel. And I love writing. I've always loved writing in English. But as a marine biologist, it was scientific reports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed sort of the writing side of it. So I now write regularly very short pieces, which I struggle to make them so short. Just about sort of life lessons, business lessons through the lens of surfing, which I really enjoy. And they're essentially about me and the Groms going surfing together. I go surfing, someone says something, and I think about what they said, and then form a parable out the back of it.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's such a great, so many people can relate to that arc, and at that, call it the second act of your life, right? To make that decision, to make that change. And you go back to the fear, you go back to that fear idea of that. And that very large change is, of course, frightening for people.
Any change is scary for people. Any change is scary for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right, though. Even just those small things. And we were talking about this a little earlier when, before we were going live, and that I kind of think of it as like, we talked about both of us moving quite a lot and having kind of that itchy feet, and moving. And also too, I think in that way, or working to slightly be outside your comfort zone, right? It's a muscle, just like anything, and it atrophies. And if we let our worlds, we live in this highly connected world now, of course. Yeah. And so if you let your world get small on both the physical and maybe the mental space and where you're at, yet you're connected to all of these things throughout. And of course, what comes through a lot of those channels is, things that trigger us in our fear, because we could, that again, a whole nother podcast, you could go into why news is negative and all the things that come from that. But things like travel and, for us, surfing, working slightly outside your comfort zone, that's what expands our minds, if you will. It expands our perspective on things. I'm fortunate enough to live. I'm on the Central Coast of California, and it is a beautiful place. I'm so fortunate. Every day I wake up, I remind myself, like, whatever little thing you're complaining about in your head, because we're humans and we get in this cycle, just stop and go walk on the beach and have a lot of gratitude for that, because it's so joyous. And for us to make sure that we get away from that, to continue to make sure we do appreciate that, and go to other places and see the joy that is there with considerably less than we're fortunate enough to have, or resources surrounding us. It's this juxtaposition sometimes, and be able to empathize with other people's experiences, yet see I just went to Ecuador. It's the second time I was down there. And the first time we were down there, it was a really young family living. Our friends lived down there, so we were down there for an extended period of time, 4 weeks or so. And then there was this young family behind. There was, I don't know, 6 or 7 kids, maybe more. And they lived in 2 rooms essentially. And they were together all the time. And the amount of joy and laughing, like you could hear from the kids and everything, I was just like, it struck me so much of, you know, and our daughter at the time was like 8. So she was like kind of noticing it and seeing it. And she said some comment, you know, in a child's perspective, like, oh, they're so happy, you know, oh, they're playing with their toys, they're so happy. And then kind of was like, they don't really have much, you know, in an 8-year-old's vocabulary and what she's relating to.
Right.
And it's like, that to me, like I've said it to her recently, even that to me is why travel and expanding your perspective on things is so important, because it was surprising her that she's asking for certain things or wanting certain things, and knowing that there's all these different kinds of lives out there. I don't know, it just helps reinforce maybe your own values, gratitude, and empathy. You know, it's all those things wrapped up into one.
And to some degree sort of question your own values or your society's values as well, because it's definitely one of the topics that we discuss a lot in the community, that often our, and again, we can take it back to the primeval, like what we say yes to, what we agree to, what we choose is often driven by what we think we're expected to choose, which might be working a lot, and it might be quite materialistic and buying lots of things, and that's what's expected, and that's what we should do, and that's what so and so does. So you sort of get swept up in that society's needs and wants and expectations. And in another society like in Ecuador or elsewhere, there's other pressures. And we can look at that and say, well, that's tougher or that's better, but it's all down to our perception. And the truth, you know, both situations are going to be challenging and good in different ways.
So I'm gonna. That's great. I have a pivot now. I just had this thought that kind of came up, which was, so that change that you made, and there's probably a laundry list of things that you could say before and after. But I'm interested in this part, which I think a lot of people, well, more people now than ever, could relate to or have an experience with, and I certainly do, which is, so you were going to an office, obviously. You had a large team around you. A lot of them would be remote, but you were interacting and working with people. And then you made this change, and now you are essentially work in your office, probably close to 100% by yourself, and are connecting with people and surfers, you know, in that way. How has that transition been for you? What things do you have to do, whether it's from a physical state of making sure you get out and move around? Like, what was that change like for you, positive and negative?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to try my best to answer sort of A to B, but actually for me, the office environment took a bit of getting used to, because before most of my work had been sort of outdoors in the environment, and not so much sort of, you know, it wasn't 9 to 5, it's a lot more than that, but you know, go into a specific office, and I had teams, they were in the jungle, or they were on the boats, or you know, different places, or I was on a ship. So that office environment was maybe for me more of the foreign environment.
Gotcha.
And then, so when I left that, for sure, I mean, I missed the people. There were some great people there. We had a great culture. You know, I still know them. There's still a great culture there. But stepping away from that, I missed the people. But what I loved was control of my own time. And despite the fact that I was CEO and in theory in control of my time, but I kept giving away that control to agree to this meeting, that meeting, this other meeting. We need to do that. We need to fix this, blah, blah, blah. So pulling it back to surfing, I'd be blocking out.
What we talk about, Steve. This is what we
blocking out the calendar. I'd say it quietly, but I'm not sure it's going to help online. yeah, definitely a surfing morning there, surfing morning there, surfing morning there, and then looking at the forecast, juggling it around, and then there's an incident there, something's happened over here. Right, can you give me a hand with this? And you're blocking out the diary, opening up those slots at the last minute, driving yourself slowly crazy. So what I won was that control of my own time. Like I wasn't, by working on my own, I had a lot less commitment in terms of specific times I had to be somewhere. So I could start at 5 a.m. and finish at 10 a.m. and surf at any point in between, and I didn't have a whole bunch of meetings sort of back to back throughout the day. So the exchange was fair for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's
but
interesting.
Again,
I
do want to add to that. Yeah, I did miss the culture and the people and the sort of the team and working dynamically as a team. But then I met other people, and although I wasn't working as a team, I still had a task, a mission that I wanted to complete, and was connecting with people and people, as you say, from all around the world, which I wasn't sort of expecting that to the extent that it's happened. Like the communities now, it's really grown. And they're a great bunch of guys. I really like the guys and girls. They're from all over. They surf. They've got similar values around the world. Similar passions and similar challenges. So I've really enjoyed that side. And I always sort of thought social media was, let's say fake is too strong a word, but it's too, you wouldn't blur the line between a friend and a online friend, a Facebook friend, would never be blurred, but it's actually becoming a little bit blurred for me, which I was quite surprised about.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I've had this experience recently myself. So I've been a coach for over 20 years, and I had a studio for a very long time, a physical studio, and I've coached surfers remotely for a long time, going on close to 10 years, and in different iterations, because the technology has really gotten up to this point. In the last 3 years, well, yeah, pretty much when COVID hit, March 2020, closed the studio down because of those restrictions, and now I'm completely online. And the first year, it went really well, surprisingly. I was able to transition and actually kind of grow in a way. And I got to this point where, not on the scale that you've described, but in a very similar dynamic, which was I had a coach, and they were doing almost all the coaching. I was doing some new clients coming in, but I was really running the pieces of the business that had to be really managed behind the scenes to keep that working efficiently, and had visions of it scaling and growing in that way. And I got to this point where, I was very unhappy with it. I was like, I'm just on this computer. I'm not really interacting. And at that point, I was doing social media, of course, to connect the market, but I had told myself this thing of this image that I had of social media, and I don't like it, or I hate it on some days. And I had this, I was telling myself this story. And at the time, my coach gave notice, and it was a little bit of a panic mode. I was like, whoa, all right. And it turned out to be such a great, as a lot of these things happen, when this thing is, you confronting this thing, and you have, okay, now what am I going to do, and make these choices. And pretty clearly I said, I want to coach more. This is why I started doing this. That's the part that I'm passionate about. That's the part that really feeds me and drives me. So I'm going to really get myself back to the coaching, and kind of, while not abandoning this growth idea, really repositioning it as like, I want to be the coach, and then let's start from that first.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, it got so much better. And my attitude towards social media really mirrors what you said, which is, when I'm truly being social and connecting with other surfers as my primary driver, it is so much more fulfilling and maybe authentic. Even that might be a strong word as well, but it feels so much more fulfilling. I'm actually interacting with people. And we had this, this go back to the idea of I hate this thing, this social media. Well, we have to realize, like, we really are the drivers of it from that place. Like, it's an algorithm, it's a system. So what we're doing, it's going to give us more. Oh, you want more of that then. So if my focus became, I'm only doing this to connect with surfers in a really genuine way. And I have this skill set and I'm truly here to help them. When I came from that place, like, my experience in the last year and a half has just been so much better. And I was glad, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I can't hate this part of it.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
But Greg, you used that word authentic there, and that probably came across in how you came across online. Like, before, if you were trying to run the business but connect to surfers for the business, it's a very different sort of mindset, and it probably came across as opposed to, actually, I just want to sort of meet and chat to surfers, and if I can help you, I will, sort of thing.
Exactly. You're right.
So my story is similar but a little bit different, but it's a good one for the surfing and just for life changes in total. So once I sort of chosen the route I wanted to go down, it became clear to me that social media was going to have to play a big part. But like you, I don't like social media. I don't agree with it. So I then had to embrace it, and I went to have a look. I think I've got a Facebook account somewhere, and it hadn't been used for, I don't know how many. I think the best part of a decade. And so I had this fear and this dislike of something I had absolutely no clue about. I hadn't used it at all. I just got this. I'd written my own truth about what I thought it was from a few comments that I'd seen, and then I started to believe that. And then the only comments I would listen to or even hear afterwards, like, I wouldn't hear all the great stories. My brain would filter them out, get rid of those because that doesn't agree with what Steve thinks. And then I'd focus on, look, Jim's got this problem with social media. So is Greg. Like, we all think the same thing, despite the millions of people.
Okay, I validated in my opinion here.
Well, no, exactly. And then once you get those beliefs, whether it's about work or committing to things or whatever it is, you just pick up on those bits of information. You're only aware of those bits of information that sort of agree. Like, we get, what do we get? Like 4 to 12, depending on who you listen to, million bits of information every second. But most of it we're not aware of because our brain just filters it out. And the bits we do get are the bits that agree with us. It's a bit like an algorithm, like you said, Facebook's or Netflix. Like, you might want to watch this because you've watched this before. You've watched this other thing.
The original algorithm, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Your brain operates like that. So, I both to teach myself a new belief about social media and sort of understand it, I had to embrace an unknown and actually get new evidence about it and go, you know what, actually, I've made a friend here. He's a real friend. He's not a connection. It's actually a real friend. And I know about his life, and I empathize with what he's going through.
Yeah. And connecting it back to that idea of travel, and as the thread is surfers, they're living generally in coastal places, which is where you're going to be traveling for. So I've had this experience, several times where I've traveled to what feels like a pretty remote place, although the thread, of course, is surfing. And so several times I've been in this, like, down in the Gulf of Dulce in Costa Rica, Pavones, I left Point Break. And I was down there and traveled solo. And then, like, I'm looking up at this one little, bar that they have and restaurant, and it's like a surf film from my hometown. And I'm like, that's weird, random. And then I was like, looking around, I was like, who put this on, And like, a couple guys raised their hand, and like one of them I knew. Like, I was like, that is just the craziest thing. And going into that expansion of that in social media, you're genuinely connecting with people. Where I traveled to New Zealand, like, we're not super close, but they've already said, like, oh, if you come to New Zealand, like, we'll definitely see each other. We'll surf. Like, what a wonderful thing that is.
Yeah. In fact, I had a guy from Brazil actually last month, and he's in the community, and we chatted a little bit. And they just popped me a message. Said, "Hey, I'm where you are. Like, do you want to go for a surf?" I was like, "Yeah, let's go for sure." So we actually hooked up and went for a couple of surfs together.
Oh man, how
It's
fun is
awesome,
that?
and I think that's if I mean there's Facebook groups, etc., and you make connections. But if you've got I term the community a community, and I think if you've got sort of similar values and passions and face similar challenges, like you really do get more of a community feel. And the global surf community is pretty similar, you know. Um, and with that, everyone's pretty supportive of each other generally, except for when they're in the water sometimes. From the high tide mark and back, like people are, like if you meet someone and they surf and you're at a bar or a barbecue, you're going to end up chatting to them maybe more than the other person with a different interest. So it's supportive, and through this community, yeah, we've sort of got people connecting from different continents and meeting up and sort of really, yeah, just enjoying, like you say. I'm going to head there. Does anyone know where to go? And someone always jumps on and goes, "Well, actually, I live there. Yeah, drop me a line. I'll take you for a surf."
I think that aspect of it is something that, you go back to what we talked about earlier, and that primal connection to the to your other humans from a
We want to
survival
belong. We really want to
perspective.
belong.
And then we're at this place where, there can be a lot of disconnect. I think we
Mm,
are just all so hungry for that genuine connection. And we have that hunger, yet our defenses are up as well, because
mm,
we're in this constant bombardment of, like you said, information just into our brain in general, marketing for that
mm.
specifically, all of that information coming at us from screens and from other things that we're doing. So we have this kind of real interesting dichotomy going on of craving connection, but having defenses against them at the same time. And it's like we have to work every day to be, always anyway, to be present and to be in that moment right there and try to connect if possible. And tools like that in the social media era, where you're genuinely, it's a give and take, can really start to build that trust
Mm.
and build that connection. And it allows people to open up a little bit more. And I think we all just so benefit from that. I had this message last night, and I took a screenshot of it just because it kind of summed up what feels so good now, and what's been shifting is, I like you, I have the Surf Strong Fit community, and it's just, ours is really centered around certainly surfing and connecting, but it's about staying in the water till our last breath. That's the focus, is the
Mm.
movement and the physical that we need to continue to do every day to do this very high level activity, and to stay able to do that mentally, physically. And I had reached out to a couple of people that, had made comments. I'm like, "Hey, thanks so much," and da da da. And they invited like 7 people to the community.
Cool.
And I
Yeah.
just sent a message back to him, and I was like, "Hey, John, thanks so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that." And his reply was something of the Nell paraphrase, but it was essentially just like, "You seem like a genuinely good person that's really wanting to help surfers, and we all need that encouragement." And I was like, yes, if someone is telling me that back, because that is how I feel. That's really
Yeah.
how I've come to the table with it. Is like, I want to help as many people as I can, and the community is all about that. Everything in there is free. Everything, and I do coach. And if a higher level, more custom is something that you need, I'm happy to help you on that. But being able to do both is so
Yeah.
important to me, because not all of us have the resources necessarily to hire a coach, but to be able to still provide information and to support to as many people as possible to stay in the water is just, it's fulfilling. And because,
Yeah.
like both of us, it's so important that we keep that in our life. We're just a better version of ourselves. I tell this to clients all the time, like, you know, my wife is so wonderful, like through all the times of everything. Part of it, I hope, is that I didn't take advantage of it, but she's never once said to me in my life, "I don't think you should go surfing right now." because she just knows what it means. Like clearing my head, my body feels better, everything is lined up for it, and then I'm back and I'm able to do the things that I need to do that much more successfully. And just to be able to do that and provide that kind of like you're doing, prioritize surfing. How do we get there? How do we plan to do that? For me, physically, what are you doing every day to make sure that you're prepared? So when the window does open, because it's not open all the time, that you can do it and have a great experience. It's just this kind of focus on it. And now to be able to wake up and feel that way about what our kind of mission, if you will, is, it's what a wonderful thing to be able to provide to people. So thank you for what you do. It really makes a difference to the people that you work with, both in your free community and, you know, your clients, and it makes a big difference.
Thanks. Yeah, I think taking it back to that community side, and you mentioned it, like people do want to belong, and I feel that to some extent, like surfers have always been maverick to a degree, or traditionally maybe we've seen ourselves like that, and I think maybe it's becoming more sort of mainstream now, but there is still that element to it of sort of stepping outside of normal society, which some people can struggle with and find a little bit hard, and some people may have done it already, but haven't found an alternative. And I think that's a part of it as well. Like where is the clan that actually understands the fact that I don't want to be in this meeting, but it's a very good job, but I don't actually want to be here. I'm much more interested in what's going on down the road, and I'm much more annoyed that I'm not there. And I think like not everyone's going to understand that and empathize with it, and some people will. As society has changed, and as you say, speeds up, that's getting harder and harder for people, and finding people who feel the same and are passionate about the same thing gives that alternate sort of community.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Just that connection and being able to help and provide that, and also to provide it for ourselves. I mean, that's been it's kind of the same idea that we've just talked about recently here, but we're building this thing that we're able to be a part of as well, and get back from what we're putting into, and that connection. Because kind of the question I asked for you is, that was something I did struggle with, is I loved my studio, and I loved being able to go in there and connect with my team and connect with, you know, clients there, and pulling that away, where I was already working quite a bit in an office at that point, you know, home office, but then it to be pretty much 100%, there was some learning curve there for sure. And I had to really start to set up, because I'm sure you probably experienced this too. It isn't a 9-to-5 job, the things that we do. And the benefits that come from that are tremendous. Like I can look at the forecast. Okay, I'm going to take that. I'm trained. That's what I have to do for that client there. I'm going to push off that recording that podcast. I'll do it at that time because I want the 9 to 11 window, because that's when the tide's going to be right. I mean, that's priceless, of course. The flip side of that is being able to work at 5 in the morning to 10 in the morning, let's say, is wonderful. But if you work at 5 to 10 and then you're working 9 to 12 at night too, and you really aren't making sure that you don't work all the time, it can leak into that place, especially if you have a passionate for the things that you're doing, helping more people, but having to make sure that you structure that to keep your own physical, mental well-being. You can't help people if you're just
for sure. But it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, when I work with people to realign, perhaps to explore sort of where they are spending their time now, so that they may well be coming to me and saying, look, I'd like to spend some more time surfing. So part of that process is sort of, where is your time being spent presently, and what's really important to you. So there's normally a whole chunk of time people are spending on stuff they don't care about whatsoever. So that can go straight away, which buys a whole bunch of extra time. There's stuff that they're agreeing to do, which they also don't really care about, but they feel that they're expected to. So that can generally go, but it's a challenge for people. I couldn't possibly say no to that. And it's like, actually, you can say yes or no. There's two choices there.
Yeah.
Like, you can say yes or no, or I'll do it next week. So you've got those choices. And then for the other stuff, actually, that is important. And like, you probably, for some people say, well, if I could, I'd just surf all the time. It's like, you could actually choose to go and surf all the time. But in truth, you don't want to surf all the time, because your family is important and some income is important. But let's get specific about it. How much income is important to you? How much is just a nice to have, and how much you're just going to spend doing stuff you don't really want to do?
Right.
And like, how much family time? Like, so you've got X amount of really important stuff that is really, really important for you. Like, so how are you going to spread your time between them? Are you going to completely cross out one? Like, surf, where a lot of people are, is like, well, actually, I've crossed out surfing completely. I've been for months. So it's just gone off the list. But they're watching Netflix, and they're doing this other stuff they don't care about.
Right.
Or they're just working all the time. They're not watching Netflix and that, but they're still not surfing, and they're not seeing their family. So it's sort of trying to figure out those balances a bit more. And it often people think it comes down to money, which is certainly an element, but actually, do they need that much? Do they need a different amount? And how much time would that take them? And are there other ways to get to that level, but spend some time on those other things that are important? So
yeah,
I have no idea why we went down that route, but you said something.
It ties all back into,
what's important. That's what I was going to say.
And those societal expectations.
Yeah. But also, what's important and who to. Like, if it's just important to you, like going into the gym, if it's just I want to be fit, I want to be healthy, like, and going to the gym to be fit and healthy, maybe you can do that. But if your kids need you to be fit and healthy, and you're going to the gym or not going to the gym, but your kids need you to go to the gym, you're much more likely to go to the gym. So it's sort of tying those, understanding what's important, but bringing other people into that reasoning as well. The same with surfing. Like, if I want to go surfing more, like, you know what, my wife and kids are going to need me to be fit and healthy, and that's part of my motivation for going surfing. So when it's a bit choppy and I'm not too sure, my kids need me to go.
Yeah. Nobody can argue with that.
Sorry, my kids are more important. So yeah, it's those sort of mind tricks. But then I'd say mind tricks are tools and strategies which are actually just genuine and real, if you take the thoughts further enough back to sort of, what are you super passionate about? What's important to you in life? What do you want on your gravestone? If it's to be a good father, you better be around.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's vocalizing those things to prioritize them and really, strip those things down. And also, if your partner in life, like, vocalizing those things together too, because like you said, a lot of times we will make assumptions about something, like, oh, this is really important. And we start talking about those things, and we find out, oh, they don't really care about that. Do I care about that? No, I don't really care about that. So let's not worry about funding that. Yeah. Let's focus on what our priorities are again, and that reposition of that, because life is short, of course, but the days and weeks can be long. So try to stay within the focuses of those things, and know what your goals are. Like, what's the destination for you, and try to backtrack those things. And those consistent things you have to do to maintain whatever and reach those goals. I mean, that's that idea. It's just this understanding where you want to go, and then those little steps you need to take every day makes it much more manageable, and makes it much more to where you're positively reinforcing the things that you're doing to reach the goals that you've stated. This is something that I always say to clients, and I really, really reinforce this, which is, these are not my goals. We are talking these things out to find out truly where you want to go. And then I will help coach and steer you to those. But you have to own them, because if I say, oh, well, this is what should be ideal for you, like, you won't care about that.
Yeah.
You will do very little, if anything, to actually take steps to get there. But when you own it and you say, yes, that is where I want to go. All right, well, let's figure out how to get you there. And that, of course, can be in fitness and strength. It can be within, mindset and, specific career goal oriented life work balance. I mean, you could just name anything. It's very much about that.
Yeah. No, I think the processes are the same. It's sort of know where you want to go, know why, and figure out how to get there. But then, as you say, be really, really clear about it, and be persistent and consistent about the steps you need to take to get there. And you're not going to get there overnight, which means you there's a period of time where life will throw a whole bunch of challenges and opportunities at you, and often people pick them up and get distracted and wander off miles off course, and then wonder quite how they ended up where they did. and so, but if you can keep all of that on point of mind and milestones, and I'm a big believer in tracking as well, and so you keep checking in. It's like a business project. It's like personal goals. If you've got a goal, be clear about it and keep stepping there, and then you can do it. It's not it's certainly not impossible. It just takes that dedication and persistence.
And having that process too also allows you to then be present in those steps to continually reevaluate. Like, is this still my goal, or a different opportunity presents itself? So it's not rigidity. It's not being, this is where I'm going. It's taking the steps of your stated goal and then always like inspecting what you expect, right? And then going, okay, yeah, the goal shifted a little bit. So that keeps you open, moving forward, but still open to opportunity and to have those things evolve and change. Because back to almost the first thing that we talked about is that stress of that change, practicing that muscle and keeping that muscle strong to adapt. So you're not, this is what it has to be, because that stress and trying to keep on that course and forcing it down that way might really blind you to some of these other wonderful things that may come. But it's, again, vocalizing and being present and stating those things. And it's certainly, we all don't need a coach for every aspect of our life, but just that sounding board, even if you don't work with professionals like us, just a sounding board of, again, your spouse, a trusted friend, like, get it outside of your head sometimes and have that perspective with somebody that you trust. Sometimes you can see things from a different way and go, oh, that does reinforce, that is what I want. Or it might really start to shift, like, oh, well, that's not really what I felt like I was going towards. It's just being open to that.
Often as well, what I hear in those conversations, it's very hard with sort of mates and spouses, because everyone's got different perceptions, and everyone's a little bit subjective as well. So quite often, I've listened to a few conversations where someone's saying that they're trying to express what they would like or where they like to go, and then you hear that being sort of mirrored or repeated back to them, but using a slightly different perspective. So a perspective that the listener has heard, and they've heard the same words, but they've translated those words into sort of their experiences and thoughts and beliefs about the world, and they've sort of repeated it back, and it's completely different. And then you hear someone say, well, that's not quite what I meant. So I think that, like, I think the biggest thing for the coaching or any communication really is to have a safe space to actually be able to think and say things out loud, as you said, and then almost have them said back to you, because sometimes even that, like, that's not what I meant when I said that. Like, I was trying to find the words and stumbling like to express what these thoughts are, and hearing it back, even if it's an accurate reflection of what you've said, can sometimes make you go, that is what I said. It's not quite what I meant. Actually, I meant this a little bit more. So it's getting that clarity, which is hard in a as you say, a busy, interconnected world. There's always something beeping or buzzing or someone calling, and a lot of those sports don't even get completed.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's a great point. Having clearly communicated back to you from somebody that not only cares about you, have this relation, but is neutral, meaning they don't have a stake in a spouse or a really close friend that cares about you, might have their own biases put on that because they fear for something that you might be doing or what that might mean to you because they really care about you. And that might cloud some of the opinion or advice that's coming back because they have their own, not agenda, but they have their own fears that are then playing on that.
I think it's fair to say agenda, because we all do to a certain extent. If there's any kind of relationship, mates or partners or whatever, there is a subjective side to the agenda, to the relationship, whether it's a mate you see once a year or other. There is some sort of balance and dynamic going on there, and so I think that to find someone that's purely objective can be quite hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you so much for being on our second version of the Surf Strong Express show. Not so express. We made it a whole hour, so that's great. We got a lot of things to talk about. I guess express could be relative if it's normally 12 hours. But I really appreciate you being on. Everything that we talked about on Work Less, Surf More, his community on Facebook, I'll have that all in the show notes. You can find all of those show notes are going to be at surfstrongfit.com/podcasts. We're going to put all of those up. Steve's been really generous about putting together a discount code for all the listeners here and everybody that's been part of that. That will be up on the show notes page as well. And Steve, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Greg, thank you. Thanks a lot for inviting me on. It's been great to have a chat and chat surfing and mindset.
Yeah, I have a feeling we might do it again in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I'd welcome it.
All right, we'll see you soon.
Welcome to the Surf Strong Show, conversations for a healthy community. I'm your host, Greg Finch. I'd like to remind you to like, comment, subscribe to this and all of our episodes of the Surf Strong Show wherever you get your podcasts. For all show notes and links that we talk about in the episodes, videos of the podcast, you can go to surfstrongfit.com/podcast for this and all the past episodes. Thanks for joining us. It really means a lot.